Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. I hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining me for this video. So that is my wife and I, have been continuing our evening poetry readings with the girls this month. They love the sonnets from Shakespeare in September, so they've been requesting, Dad, we want a bedtime poem. Dad, we need another poem. So I'm going to oblige. I love poetry. I joke sometimes as a mathematics teacher that there are ways in which poetry is the mathematics of language, and I don't want to. I don't want to be too formal or rigid around that. But there are ways in which the rhythms of great poetry do fall into those patterns, those mathematical patterns, and I love poetry. So this week we read, and read seems too light a word, perhaps chanted, sang, read through the Tamarit Divan of Federico García Lorca, and I loved it. I was amazed. I've read, this is a volume of his collected poems. It's enormous, and it's a bilingual edition, which I'll probably reference at the end, is very wonderful and valuable. I've read a number of Garcia Lorca's poems, gypsy ballads, his odes, Poet in New York, all of which are wildly distinct, poetic forms, and also voices to a certain degree from Garcia Lorca. The poet of gypsy ballads is not the same poet necessarily as Poet of New York. There is deep divergence there, and that's one of the things I appreciate about Garcia Lorca is I'm never bored when I read his poetry because it's distinct, it's unusual, it is different from his other work. Each piece sort of stands on its own in a really cool way. But I had not realized what an absolutely marvelous poet he is at writing elegies, which is one of my favorite poetic forms. I love the elegies of Donne. I thoroughly enjoyed the elegies of Tibullus and Sulpicia when I read those in July. And so to find just how skilled he is as a poet writing in that elegiac vein was astonishing. And it was astonishing to see how he finds ways to fuse beauty and realism in a way that I think is kind of unusual in 20th century poetry that, moved in sort of either highly formal or wildly sort of free and blank directions. And Garcia Lorca almost has this medieval tradition, this alchemy, where he's taking really startling and beautiful images and in pushing them into the poem and crafting the poem around them. So I absolutely loved the Tamarit Divans. I want to read just a few and sort of call out some really wonderful components from them. These were translated by Catherine Brown, and quite well. So this is a Gazelle of Love Unforeseen. No one understood the perfume, ever, the dark magnolia of your belly. No one ever knew you martyred love's hummingbird between your teeth. 1,000 Persian ponies fell asleep in the moonlit plaza of your brow, while 4 nights through I bound your waist, the enemy of snow. Between plaster and jasmine, your glance, pale branch of seed. I searched my breast to give you the ivory letters saying, ever, 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 my agony's garden, your elusive form forever. Blood of your veins in my mouth, your mouth now lightless for my death. So I think that's an absolutely fantastic poem. And you see, in the second line, the dark magnolia of your belly. That's an interesting line. That's a really interesting line. But then we go down, you martyred love's hummingbird between your teeth. That's startling. So there's interesting poetry, that's a really cool image. Oh, that's fascinating. I haven't thought of that together. And then there's startling. There's something that sort of knocks you back, that makes you sit up, pay more closer attention to the poem. So again, we've martyred love's hummingbird between our teeth. And going farther down, ever, ever, my agony's garden, your elusive form forever. Blood of your veins in my mouth. Again, startling. We can taste the blood. We know what blood tastes like. We've tasted, we've bit our tongues, we've bit our cheeks, we've tasted blood in our mouth. But to taste that, your mouth now lightless for my death. Just a wonderful, startling, unusual poem. So now we have the third of these, Gazelle of Desperate Love. Night does not want to come, so that you cannot come, so that I cannot go. But I will go, though a son of scorpions feed on my temples. But you will come, with your tongue burnt by the shower of salt. Day does not want to come, so that you cannot come, so that I cannot go. But I will go, and cede to the toads my bitten carnation. but you will come through the murky sewers of darkness. Night and day do not want to come, so that I die for you and you for me. And again, we have these lines in there that are just so... A son of scorpions feed on my temples. That sounds absolutely terrifying. And it's dropped in as we have this lovely like chant almost that's going on. So again, I just find Garcia Lorca an astonishing poet. I'm going to read one more. This is from... So the book is divided into the ghazals and then the qasidas. So this is Qasida of the Woman Prone. To see you naked is to remember the earth, the smooth earth, clean of horses, the earth without reeds, pure form, closed to the future, confine of silver. To see you naked is to understand the desire of rain that looks for the delicate waste, or the fever of the broad-faced sea that cannot find the light of its cheek. Blood will ring through the bedrooms and will come with flaming swords, but you will not know the hiding places of the violet or the heart of the toad. Your womb is a struggle of roots. Your lips are a dawn without contour. Under the lukewarm roses of the bed, the dead men moan, awaiting their turn. And, I mean, again, we just have these images that push into our minds, that you know, sort of like almost stab us and make us want to pay closer attention to, you know, what we're reading, what we're hearing if it's read aloud to us. And I think that is one of Garcia Lorca's greatest skills, is to take a familiar form. You know, he didn't necessarily like invent any poetic forms, but he takes familiar forms and then he makes them unfamiliar and startling and original. And I just appreciate any poet who does that. And I especially enjoy Garcia Lorca. So a couple of quick sort of like references. I had mentioned, you know, I was reminded of like the Elegies of Tiburce that I had read in July. And there's also this sense of sort of that medieval poetry. So some of the ballad forms, Sir Patrick Spence is a great ballad that came to mind. That's one I had read a couple of weeks ago to my kids. And then, of course, the sort of troubadour poetry. I read this in January, February, and was absolutely... These are the medieval troubadour poets, you know, from medieval France. And then... you know, another 20th century poet who I think kind of pushed in that way, not necessarily pushing images the same way Garcia Lorca did, but who did explore some of those classical veins in really interesting ways, would be Rainier Maria Rilke, who has the Duino Elegies would fit, I think, closely with the Tamarit Divan. And then sort of a strange one, Garcia Lorca famously wrote a number of plays, one of which is Blood Wedding. And there's an incredible film version of a Spanish flamenco ballet that is going to be performed by Antonio Gades, and it's filmed by Carlos Saura. The Criterion Collection released it in their Eclipse series. It's called Blood Wedding. It's really quite fun and interesting. One of the connections I always find with Garcia Lorca was his emphasis on this idea of, I think he called it a duende. And it always his references to that always remind me of the way Plato writes about Socrates and his daimon. So I kind of was just like reminded of Socrates and Plato. You know, it is of course a great tragedy that at the beginning of the Spanish Civil War, Garcia Lorca, like a number of other individuals in Spain, were just flat out murdered by Franco's fascist troops, I guess, or police. And you know, The Uncertain Glory by Joan is an incredible novel set primarily during the Spanish Civil War, and I read this in January. And Garcia Lorca was, I believe, Andalusian, and Sales was a Catalan writer. But they both sort of, you know, they're writing about the same time period, kind of relatively in the same time period. So that, if you've never read the Tamarit Divan by Garcia Lorca or any of his poetry, I highly, highly recommend it. So let me know what you think. Thanks. Bye.